Hey everybody, I just wanted to give another example. I think this will be my last, but I don't want to keep overwhelming you with examples, but I want to make sure that you see a variety of ways that a researcher can use email to give a letter of introduction to the study and then also then see how the study proceeds. So I'll do a short overview for this one. So this is what I received in the mail. I think I had a prior email. So this is an example of them maybe knowing, they may or may not know whether I filled it out before. So they are sending, probably the initial email said this letter of introduction. And this one you'll notice says this is a reminder that their center is going to conduct this study, a little bit about what it's about, who's behind it, the link, the pressures, etc. So they're placing it into context. The person is introducing himself and obviously his roles and what have you, and also who was improved by the IRB board. We need to talk a little bit more about that than we maybe did this term. And then you are receiving this request to voluntarily participate, and then information. So it says about unsubscribe, so it's possible that I belong to a list that maybe sent out this email, but I don't have a memory of that. So for now, and I can't tell from this email address very much more, but I believe it's legitimate. So I had already gone to the site. Excuse me for showing you two emails. So this is what opened up when I clicked the link, and then it's giving me additional information. I'm going to move this over a little bit, and I'm going to stop. Sorry, I'm going to stop this. I'm going to try to get rid of that. And so uh, it's basically repeating in some ways, not identically, what the email said. So we're using this data, telling us a little bit about it. Again, that's partly to encourage, partly to inform, and that they're trying to assure me about what they're going to do with the data and any information I provide. Using a Qualtrics survey. Some of you have used that. You might have used Excel. You might have used Google Forms. You could have used SurveyMonkey. I think there's a few other free ones out there for you can ask a few questions. And there's also polling. Polling can be considered a type of survey. So I know there are polling sites out there. We'll probably use a few in this class if we haven't already. And then, of course, Qualtrics, which I understand some people at OUZ anyway have been using in their statistics class. I don't know how. I haven't seen the syllabus, so I'm not sure. I'm not more familiar than that with that. Just heard people referring to it. So it's telling me a little bit about that, what information and share if there's a demonstrated need to know, legal obligation, etc. That's an interesting thing. I haven't seen that line before, but Texas may have had something unusual happen, and maybe they've come about the business of doing that, or this university could have. So these two people are the researchers, and they are saying that they received this approval number from their IRB for 2020 and moving forward. And then I would continue to go on. So I am indicating that I am giving consent. I'm sure you all can understand how that works. Now, I don't see that page again. So if I want those phone numbers as a research person, I need to know that. If these folks really do a good job, they will also repeat their email addresses and phone numbers at the end, because most people will think, I'm just moving forward. Why would I need them? And if you had that, you might not be able to get it, because once you've completed the survey, you probably won't be able to use the link again, at least on that same computer. Sometimes a person can open an email on another computer and be able to do it. So you wouldn't be sure you needed it, but that might be one way to do that. If you remember the researcher's name, you could always look them up online or something if you had questions later. So you get a sense of the kind of questions there. This is a pretty basic Likert scale here. How they're going to determine these differences is a little bit curious to me, and then whether something doesn't apply or what have you. I probably wouldn't. I wouldn't personally advise this, and I'm not sure why they feel like they're that's useful to them in some way. So they're going to code these maybe 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 0 for this one, and I said six, didn't I? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and the real key will be if people put these, what will be the difference? It's always interesting to see what are the differences between these and what are the statistical differences between these. Of course, sometimes you want to see, how many people do you have that are this, and you might combine this data. I'm sure you talked about that in research, where if you wanted to make something stronger, you might put these two together, or you might put all your disagrees, even though they're of differing degrees. You might put them together and put them together and see if you get statistical significance. And sometimes people are able to do that with that manipulation. Now that's just talking about research. Now I'm just talking about the layout of this. So because Qualtrics is organized the way it does, it's pretty straightforward. It goes on a long time, and I don't know if Qualtrics gives you the option. A paper survey, you might copy this again to remind people, but in this case, they could just scroll back up and see what is this again? Because people forget. When you're the researcher and you've taken a research class, your awareness is heightened more to the attention to detail. But to an average person, they might not be. Now, their population are academics, so they're probably assuming that we're paying a lot more attention to research and don't need that. But I'm mentioning it for your own surveys. Now, I haven't answered anything, so it's probably not going to let me go forward. And if it does, that's a little bit unusual, but maybe they're allowing people to no required answers, in other words. So then the second question is open ended. This means that the first part would be calculated quantitatively, and then here you would be doing something qualitative. So they're looking for what kind of things do we say in this. In these boxes, are the one word or two words or sentences, and then what are the themes and the themes within a person's thing. So what if I talk about I don't know what I want to say right now, but some kind of reflection, like how challenging it was to not be able to see students on a screen. And maybe I say that 2 or 3 times. Well, clearly within my survey, that's going to rise to the top because there aren't that many questions. So it's going to rise something about communication or feeling, something. So the person could add, they don't have to use my exact words. They can say communication for my saying, frustrated with the need for using technology, grateful for the technology that we could be together, frustrated by not being able to have more engagement with face to face or I mean, looking at people's faces and seeing their reactions. Or when they did, that there wasn't any uniformity to it, that some people were laying in their beds, some people were sitting in chairs, some people were on their couches, some were under their coffee table, their legs under their coffee table with their phone on, some were using an iPad, some were holding the thing and it shook a lot. There's been a lot of things over the time. So I might mean a lot of things with that, and maybe I'll say all of them, or maybe I won't. And maybe that would be the number one thing that I'm wanting to report on for this. Later, when I'm looking at this survey and the 10 others or the 100 others that I get, I'll be looking for themes across what kind of things did many people talk about or 5 people talk about. Maybe I'll have some idea that if at least 5 people talk about X, I'm going to call that a theme. And hopefully we will have talked by the time you see this video about the difference between a theme and a variable and that. So I'm not going to go on and on about that. I am going to go ahead. Additional comments that you'd like to make. I imagine this is the end of the survey. Well, no, because of course this is common. I shouldn't have said that. I didn't know. Demographics, asking that, how to ask that. I just took a survey the other day, and it was from some people in California, and this ethnicity section had over 60 choices of that, as did, well, I think it was the ethnicity that had 60, and the racial categories were similar to this. I think there might have been 1 or 2 more. Prefer not to say. It has become more common in the last few years. I mean, that was always an option, but it was kind of interesting to see how it's used now more commonly, especially with things about maybe things related to either marital or relationship status, sometimes with age. But let's go back up and refresh my memory. It does ask age, it asks gender, age, ethnicity, race, name of the institution, which then I guess they would pinpoint what part of the country if they wanted to do that, and then what your role is filling this out, and that. Oh, and then a department or a major. So quite a few things. Maybe you think that's enough. Maybe you don't. It's their survey. They're allowed to decide. And then this is common. They didn't put their email or anything on, but also it wasn't a terribly long survey. So that might be why, if this went on, I took one recently that took me almost 35 minutes, and it seemed like they were asking me the same thing over and over, but the context would change. So the questions were the same as it went down. My choices in the Likert scale were identical to the prior question, but then this time it was in practice, and this time it was research, and the next time it was policy, and the next time it was, sort of your educational preparation, and the answers were then the same. And I thought, well, I guess that is not a bad way to go, but I did feel like I was answering the same thing in some ways over and over, but the context should change it or could change it. So anyway, that was longer, and those folks did not provide their information at the end, and I think that's common. What I'm saying to you is that we maybe there's no harm, no foul in reminding people who you are and a way to contact you and the IRB one last time as you're finishing up, and people will use it, write it down if they feel like they want to make a concern, and if not, I just feel like it's extra due diligence, but it's certainly not something that you see very often in surveys anymore. But a thank you is great, and letting folks know. And if you have questions, reaching out to our center. To my way of thinking, instead of saying that, say what it is, and that. Now, maybe you can go there if you click on that. I don't know. I'm not going to do that for the video. And then thank you for taking your time. It's been recorded, and that's the end of that. So thank you for your time, and we'll see. So you have this and the other to compare, and maybe we'll talk about them and see how they fit in with the things that David Royce is talking about within the couple of chapters on how to develop a survey and using existing surveys. Thanks for your attention.